Hi there, just want to show you how these NV2500, 3500 screens are constructed. My NV is a high top NV, but I think these fit any NV. So you can see this fits on the window outside. It's like a sock, it's like a sleeve. It fits over both sides. Now it's constructed of one layer of netting, both outside and inside, sandwiched between two layers of 3-inch grosgrain ribbon. If you can see, the grosgrain ribbon is stitched up on the top here. That's where it catches the screening. And down at the bottom, it's just sewn to itself all the way over. Now here on the interior side, or the inside side, you can see this inside side has volume to it. See how thick the door is there. So the amount of screening and the amount of ribbon takes into account how thick the door is. So it's not just a flat piece of screening that you fit in between your ribbons. You've got to make sure that it can actually wrap around, if you will, the volume on the door. Notice how the bottom of the ribbon is about an inch above the armrest here on the door. You can have it all the way down if you want. You could even have it a little higher. The reason it sits down this far is because it's intended to match exactly how far down the outside goes. Now the outside needs to go down this far so that you can stick it with magnets down to the metal. If you don't stick it down with magnets to the metal, I think you would get some bugs up underneath it. So that's why I've used magnets. I'll return to the outside in a minute, but I wanted to complete the inside so you can see this is basically a frame with seams at each of the corners, if you will. Now here on the inside, you don't really have to do a cutout, but there's those bolts, and I didn't want any screening on the bolts. So this only goes as far as to hit the bolts sort of a little bit when it's closed, but it hits right at the ribbon. And that ribbon is pretty strong. Again, it's 2 full layers of this ribbon with the screening sandwiched inside. So it's pretty darn strong. Up at the top, you can see it's an interesting angle. I can't even tell you what that angle is. I fitted that right on the door. And then this is all stitched to the outside layer. So the inside layer and outside layer are stitched on this edge, on the top, and on the side over here. They are not stitched together, obviously, down at the bottom, or you wouldn't be able to slip this over. And they are not stitched together where on the outside it goes around the mirror, and on the inside it has to complete. Look, it's keeping a bumblebee out. It has to sort of complete the frame over here. You really need to have this piece in order to complete the frame. Now, coming to the outside, you can see, there, it's keeping a bug out. You can see that I've fixed magnets about every 4 inches or so into the bottom here to keep it tacked down. There we go. To keep it tacked down to the frame to keep the bugs out. So the way those pockets are made, now again, I've got the ribbon, I've got a top seam, and that's what sandwiches it to the netting. And I've got the bottom seam, which just sort of closes the tube, if you will. I've got an additional seam all the way along the length of this, which helps create the pockets for the magnets. Now, the other piece that creates these magnet pockets is just these little teeny stitching seams, if you will, bits of stitches that keep the magnets from migrating together. If there were not stitches here, these magnets would over time just glom together and would not be evenly spaced anymore. When you put these magnets in, you don't want this seam yet, and you don't obviously want any of these seams yet. What you want is this top seam and this bottom seam with an opening, which in the case of this one, the opening was over here on the edge, which flips underneath your mirror. Now you can have this a little bit longer so it extends further under the mirror. That's personal choice. What I did was I stitched the top and the bottom, and then I started dropping magnets in one by one. I held it vertically, and I dropped a magnet in, shook it till it fell all the way over here. And then I put some pins in right here where I knew I was going to want one of these little seams. So the pins were intended to keep the next magnet from dropping all the way down to this magnet. So I put pins all the way, just a couple of pins, 1 and 2, right there. And then I dropped in another magnet. And then I put more pins in and another magnet, more pins in and another magnet. And that way I created my pocket. Now it's funny because the magnets will stick to your pins, but at least they won't stick to each other. So once I had all the magnets in, then first I stitched this long bit to keep them from migrating up here. And then I stitched 1, 2, 3. It's really a pain, but this was the last part of the process. You want to put your magnets in very last because they stick to each other. It's a pain in the drain. You do want magnets, 1 or 2, here on the end to keep this flap nice and secure down at the bottom. Now I do want to point out here on this outside part, the way that we get around the mirror is we've got a bit of this ribbon that goes around the top. Again, this has a magnet. I should have put it more toward the middle, but it has a magnet to sort of hold it down against the metal here. And there's a gusset that attaches this vertical piece, which is that's not a perfect 90-degree angle there. If you had a perfect 90-degree angle, you'd need a bigger gusset, which you can certainly do. You need a couple of pieces to make the gusset out of this 3-inch ribbon because it's not quite wide enough. So in this situation, I actually used a folded over piece of ribbon first to attach directly to the screening, and I realized that wasn't big enough, so I used another folded over piece. I would like it to be a little bit wider. So my recommendation is to use a full 3-inch wide piece up and down, and then figure out what kind of a gusset you need to get around the mirror. The gusset is attached, back behind here. It doesn't need to be pretty back behind. You want it to be pretty, of course, out in the front, so you get oohs and ahs from the people that you meet camping along the way. But you can see, again, you see the outside seams. So the ribbon is stitched together. We've got this outside piece, and we've got the inside piece. Those are separate. You can hear the magnets clicking and sticking. You create the inside piece, you create the outside piece. You do those two things separately. And when you fit it onto the van, you're going to bring it out. Before you stitch it together, you're going to bring it out, and you're going to put pins all along where this seam would be, where you are putting them together. You're going to pin roughly along here on this side, the top and the front. You're going to put it on the door, and you're going to make sure that it fits to your satisfaction. Now, at the very beginning of the process, I had one layer, the inside layer. So this layer underneath, that layer underneath, and this layer underneath. So I call those the inside layers. I had pinned those together, brought it out here with the netting, and I pinned the netting right in place because this netting, it's really hard to mark the netting or measure the netting because it doesn't really take chalk very well. You can mark it with pins, but I will tell you, those pins will stick you 1,000,000 times and you're going to start cursing and hating yourself. So, so my advice is you get your 2 layers cut, 2 layers of ribbon for out here, the back and the front. 2 layers of ribbon cut for the inside, again, the back and the front. You take that back piece, you create a frame, 1 layer of the frame. You pin those 2 layers together. One inside layer, 1 outside layer. You come outside with your netting and you pin your netting in place so you know it will fit. Again, this netting on the inside needs to have volume. This whole mechanism on the inside needs to have volume. So if you were to have laid this frame flat on your table and pin netting to it, it wouldn't fit. It would be too flat. So you need volume. So definitely pin it in place out here. So once you have that in place, of course, you've pinned this netting to the inside part of your frame, then you lay these pieces over top of the whole thing and stitch it all up. The last thing you do, of course, is to stitch the outside and the inside, stitch those two things together. You can fit it in place if you wish. Put your magnets in, sew up your end, you're done. And it comes on and off like an absolute dream. It's just so easy. I'm only 5'2" and I can do it very easily. It's not too tight. You know, don't make it too tight. You don't want to struggle with it. You just want it to be nice and easy. And it comes down super easy. So anyway, I hope this little video has been helpful to you, to explain to you what my process was and how you can do this yourself and be successful. And if you have any questions, just let me know. All right, thanks.